The morning sky above Earth changed forever when the silver ships appeared. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Orbital Defense Station, watching through the thick glass as three massive vessels descended through the clouds. He had seen many spacecraft in his 20 years of service, but nothing like these. The alien ships moved like liquid mercury, their surfaces rippling and shifting as they caught the sunlight. Jake pressed the communication button on his console. "Command, this is Morrison. The visitors are approaching as scheduled." His voice stayed calm, but his hands shook slightly. First contact with an alien species was something humanity had dreamed about for centuries, and now it was happening on his watch. The lead ship was enormous, easily 5 times larger than Earth's biggest space cruiser. As it drew closer, Jake could see that its hull seemed to be made of some material that bent light around it, creating strange patterns that hurt to look at directly. The ship came to a stop just outside the station's defensive perimeter, hovering silently in the vacuum of space. Dr. Lisa Park arrived on the observation deck 30 minutes later. Carrying her tablet and looking excited despite the early hour, she was Earth's top expert on alien cultures, though until today that had been purely theoretical work. "Any communication yet?" she asked Jake. "They sent a simple message in perfect English about an hour ago," Jake replied. "Just said they wanted to meet with our leaders and had gifts for humanity." Lisa nodded, making notes on her tablet. "Gifts are significant in most Earth cultures. Could be a good sign." She paused, studying the alien vessel. "Or it could mean they think we're primitives who need their help." The meeting took place in the station's largest conference room. The aliens transported over using technology that made them simply appear in a flash of blue light. Jake had to blink several times before his eyes adjusted and he could see their visitors clearly. The beings were tall, at least 7 feet high, with pale skin that seemed to glow from within. They had long, thin arms and faces that were almost human but not quite. Their eyes were larger than human eyes and completely black. When they moved, they did so with a grace that made Jake think of dancers. The leader stepped forward and spoke in a voice that sounded like music. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Zilithian Consortium. We greet the people of Earth and welcome you to the greater galaxy." General Patricia Hayes, the station commander, stood to respond. "Welcome to our space, Ambassador Veltar. We are honored by your visit." Veltar nodded slowly. "We have traveled far to bring you gifts that will help prepare your species for the challenges ahead. The galaxy is vast and filled with dangers that your people have not yet encountered." Dr. Park leaned forward in her chair. "What kind of dangers?" "There are species in the dark spaces between stars that consume entire worlds," Veltar said calmly. "Others that turn civilizations against themselves until nothing remains but empty planets. Your species shows promise, but you will need to grow strong quickly if you wish to survive." The gift ceremony took place on Earth's surface, in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Jake watched from a transport ship as the alien vessels released their cargo onto the sand below. What came down was not what anyone had expected. Huge chunks of twisted metal crashed into the desert, sending up clouds of sand and dust. Broken pieces of what looked like spacecraft hulls scattered across several square miles. Some pieces were the size of houses, others no bigger than a car. All of it looked damaged, burned, or torn apart. Chief Engineer Ben Clark stood next to Jake in the transport, staring down at the wreckage. "This is their gift?" he said, sounding insulted. "It looks like they dumped their garbage on us." But Dr. Park was studying the debris through binoculars, and she had a different expression on her face. "No," she said quietly. "Look closer. See how the pieces are arranged? This isn't random." Jake looked again and began to see what she meant. The wreckage formed patterns across the desert floor. Some pieces seemed to fit together like puzzle parts. Others had damage that looked too precise to be accidental. Ambassador Veltar appeared next to them in another flash of blue light. "Your gifts await below, humans of Earth. Study them well. Learn their secrets. Your survival may depend on how quickly you understand what we have given you." "What exactly did you give us?" General Hayes asked. "Knowledge," Veltar replied. "The wreckage contains technology from 12 different species across the galaxy. Some were our allies. Others were our enemies. All faced the same darkness that now approaches your region of space." Dr. Park stepped closer to the alien ambassador. "You're not just welcoming us to the galaxy, are you? You're preparing us for war." Veltar's large black eyes seemed to show sadness. "War finds all species eventually, Dr. Park. The question is whether they are ready when it arrives. We have given you the tools to prepare, but it will be up to your people to understand how to use them. The alien ships departed that same day, leaving behind only their strange gift and many questions. Jake remained in the desert with the research teams that arrived to study the wreckage. As the sun set over the scattered debris, he walked among the twisted metal pieces, trying to understand what the aliens had really given them. One fragment caught his attention. It was about the size of a dinner plate, made of a metal that seemed to shift color in the fading light. When he touched it, the metal felt warm and seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. For just a moment, he thought he could hear something like distant music coming from inside the metal. Dr. Park joined him as the stars began to appear overhead. "The preliminary scans are incredible," she said. "These materials don't match anything in our periodic table. Some of the energy signatures suggest technology centuries ahead of what we can build. But why give it to us like this?" Jake asked. "Why not just share their technology directly?" Lisa smiled and picked up another piece of the strange wreckage. "Because they're not just giving us technology, Jake. They're giving us a test. They want to see what we can do with it, how we think, how we solve problems." As they spoke, more research teams arrived in the desert. Scientists, engineers, and military experts from around the world came to study the alien gift. The wreckage would be carefully moved to secure facilities where humanity's best minds would work to unlock its secrets. Jake looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, the Zilithians were watching and waiting to see what humanity would do with their gift of wreckage. The real test was just beginning. 6 months had passed since the aliens left their gift in the desert. The twisted metal pieces now filled 3 massive warehouses at the Phoenix Research Facility in Nevada. Dr. Elena Rodriguez walked through the main laboratory every morning at 7 sharp, coffee in hand, ready to tackle another day of impossible puzzles. The facility buzzed with activity 24 hours a day. Scientists from every nation on Earth had come to study the alien wreckage. Engineers worked alongside physicists, while computer experts tried to understand technology that seemed to operate on completely different principles than anything humans had ever built. Commander Alex Stone headed the military side of the research. He was a practical man who had spent his career solving problems with available resources. The alien wreckage presented the biggest challenge of his life, and he approached it the same way he approached everything else. "One piece at a time. Show me what you found today," Alex said to Dr. Rodriguez as he entered her section of the lab. Elena picked up a device no bigger than a coffee cup. "This little thing generates more power than our biggest nuclear reactor," she said. "We still have no idea how it works, but we can measure the energy output. It's incredible." The device looked simple enough. It was made of the same color-shifting metal they had found in many pieces of the wreckage. Small symbols covered its surface, but they changed and moved when anyone looked at them directly. Sometimes the symbols glowed, sometimes they faded to nothing. Lieutenant Danny Cross had been working on the weapons fragments for 3 months. He was a young officer with a talent for understanding how things broke and how they could be fixed. The alien weapons fascinated him because they seemed to break all the rules of physics he had learned. "Commander Stone, you need to see this," Danny called from his workstation. Alex walked over to find Danny standing next to a large piece of what looked like a ship's hull. The metal was scored with deep cuts and blast marks, but the damage patterns were too precise to be random. "I've been studying the damage on all the hull pieces," Danny explained. "At first I thought these ships were destroyed in battle, but that's not what happened. Look at these cuts here." He pointed to a series of parallel lines in the metal. "These were made by weapons that could pass through the ship's shields completely." Alex studied the marks more carefully. "You're saying the weapons went through the shields like they weren't there?" "Exactly," Danny said. "And look at this blast pattern." He showed Alex a circular burn mark on another piece of hull. "This explosion happened inside the ship, but there's no entry point. Whatever hit this ship could phase through solid matter. The breakthrough came when Casey Brooks made a discovery that changed everything." Casey had been a mechanic before joining the research team, and she looked at the wreckage differently than the scientists did. While they studied individual pieces, she looked at how things might fit together. She was working late one night in Warehouse 2 when she noticed something odd about the way several pieces were arranged. The research teams had sorted the wreckage by size and material type, but Casey saw different patterns. "Dr. Rodriguez, Commander Stone, you both need to see this." Casey's voice came over the intercom at midnight. They found her standing next to a large table where she had arranged dozens of smaller pieces. At first glance, it looked like random metal fragments, but as they studied Casey's arrangement, they began to see the connections. "These pieces fit together," Casey said, pointing to several fragments. "Not the way they were originally, but in a new configuration. Look here." She showed them how one piece's damaged edge perfectly matched another piece's broken surface. "The aliens didn't give us broken ships. They gave us building blocks." Over the next week, Casey's discovery led to more revelations. Teams throughout the facility began looking for new ways to combine pieces. They found that fragments from different ships could be joined together using principles they were only beginning to understand. The alien metal seemed to want to connect with other pieces. When compatible fragments were brought close together, they would begin to resonate, creating harmonious vibrations that could be felt through the floor. Sometimes the pieces would actually move toward each other, as if pulled by invisible magnets. Dr. Rodriguez worked with Casey to map out these connections. "It's like they gave us a construction kit," Elena said. "But instead of instructions, they left us clues in the damage patterns." Commander Stone studied their findings with growing understanding. "They're not just teaching us their technology. They're teaching us how to think like them, how to see possibilities instead of limitations." The real test came when the teams tried to actually build something using the alien principles they had learned. Chief designer Ryan Webb led the effort to create humanity's first hybrid human-alien device. They started small, combining 3 pieces of alien technology with human engineering. The result was a power cell that could run for years without recharging. It was crude compared to the alien originals, but it worked using principles that humans could understand and reproduce. "We're not just copying their technology," Ryan explained to the assembled research team. "We're learning to think the way they think, to see connections they see." The success of the power cell led to more ambitious projects. Teams began working on larger assemblies, combining dozens of alien fragments with human engineering. Each success taught them more about the underlying principles of alien technology. But the biggest revelation came when Dr. Rodriguez discovered what the aliens had really given them. She was studying the power signatures of all the different fragments when she noticed a pattern that had been hidden in the complexity. "Commander Stone," she called urgently, "I think I know why the aliens gave us this specific collection of wreckage." Alex hurried to her workstation, where Elena had created a 3-dimensional map showing the origin points of all the wreckage pieces. The map showed 12 different locations scattered across the galaxy. "Each piece comes from a different species," Elena explained. 12 different civilizations, each with their own approach to technology. The aliens didn't just give us their own technology. They gave us examples from across the galaxy. Alex stared at the map, understanding dawning on his face. "They're showing us what's possible, what other species have achieved." "More than that," Elena said quietly. "They're showing us what we'll need to survive." Each of these technologies addresses a different type of threat. The phasing weapons, the adaptive shields, the self-repairing hull materials. This isn't just a gift, Alex, it's a curriculum. As the research teams worked through the night, combining alien principles with human innovation, they began to understand the true scope of what they had been given. The wreckage was not an ending, but a beginning. It was humanity's first lesson in galactic survival, taught by beings who had seen civilizations rise and fall across the stars. The real work was just beginning. 2 years after the alien gift arrived on Earth, something extraordinary was taking shape in the hidden shipyards of Titan Station. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood behind the thick observation windows, watching as the final sections of hull plating were installed on humanity's greatest achievement. The ship was beautiful in a terrifying way. At nearly 2 kilometers long, it moved through space like a living shadow. The hull was made from the alien alloys that the research teams had learned to work with, but it looked nothing like the original wreckage. Human engineering had transformed the scattered pieces into something entirely new. Chief designer Ryan Webb joined Admiral Sullivan at the observation window. Dark circles under his eyes showed the countless sleepless nights he had spent bringing this vision to life. "She's almost ready for her first flight tests," he said quietly. The ship had no official name yet, but everyone at Titan Station called it the Iron Shadow Phantom. The name had started with the construction crews and spread through the entire facility. Even the official reports now used the unofficial designation, Captain Grace Mitchell walked through the ship's corridors for the first time that morning. She had been chosen to command this vessel after a careful selection process that tested not just her skills as a pilot, but her ability to work with technology that no human fully understood. The corridors felt both familiar and alien. Human engineering principles had been used wherever possible, but the alien technology required different approaches. The walls seemed to pulse with a faint inner light, and the floors vibrated with energy that could be felt through the soles of boots. "Captain Mitchell, welcome aboard," Engineering Chief Tony Baker said as Grace entered the main engineering section. Tony had worked on the ship since the first pieces were assembled 3 years ago. He knew every system better than anyone else, though he was the first to admit that some things still puzzled him. "How long until we can run full flight tests?" Grace asked, studying the massive power core that dominated the engineering bay. "The ship is technically ready now," Tony replied. "But Captain, I need to warn you about something. Some of these systems activate on their own. They respond to threats that our sensors can't even detect." Grace nodded. She had read the reports about the ship's unusual behavior during construction. Tools would move by themselves when workers were in danger. Safety systems would engage before accidents happened. The ship seemed to be aware of its surroundings in ways that made everyone uncomfortable. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now serving as the ship's chief science officer, had spent months studying this phenomenon. "The alien technologies aren't just tools," she explained to Grace during their first briefing. "They learn and adapt. This ship isn't just built from alien tech, it's becoming something new." The Iron Shadow Phantom incorporated 12 different types of alien technology, each one representing lessons learned from the Wreckage study. The stealth system could bend light and sensor waves around the ship, making it nearly invisible. The weapons could phase through enemy shields. The propulsion system folded space itself, allowing for incredible speeds. But the most remarkable feature was the adaptive hull. The outer plating could change its properties based on threats or environmental conditions. It could become harder than diamond when hit by weapons, or softer than silk when passing through debris fields. Lieutenant Sam Wright, the ship's tactical officer, ran diagnostics on the weapons systems. "The targeting computers are incredible," he reported to Captain Mitchell. "They can track thousands of objects simultaneously and predict their movements minutes in advance." The weapons themselves were unlike anything humans had ever built. Instead of firing projectiles or energy beams, they projected fields that could disrupt the molecular structure of enemy ships. The effect was devastating but precise, able to disable specific systems without destroying entire vessels. Navigator Lisa Park had the strangest job on the ship. The alien navigation system didn't use stars or planets as reference points. Instead, it read the fabric of space itself, detecting currents and flows that normal sensors couldn't perceive. "It's like the ship can feel where it wants to go," she told the other officers. The first test flight was scheduled for a quiet Tuesday morning. Captain Mitchell sat in the command chair as her crew ran through the pre-flight checklist. The bridge was a blend of human and alien design, with familiar control stations surrounded by displays that showed information in ways no human engineer had ever imagined. "All systems green." "Captain," reported Tony Baker from engineering. "Power core is stable at 60% output. Navigation ready," Lisa Park announced. Course plotted for a simple orbit around Titan. Grace looked around at her crew. They were all experienced officers, but none of them had ever flown anything like this ship. "Take us out slow and steady." The Iron Shadow Phantom moved away from the construction dock with surprising grace. Despite its massive size, it handled like a small fighter craft. The alien propulsion system responded to the pilot's thoughts almost before commands were entered into the computer. As they cleared the station's protective fields, the ship's stealth system activated automatically. On the tactical display, Grace watched as the Iron Shadow Phantom simply vanished from all sensors. Even the station's most advanced detection equipment couldn't track them. "This is incredible," whispered Communications Officer Nicole Parker. "We're completely invisible to everything." But the real surprise came when they attempted their first faster-than-light jump. The alien space-folding drive engaged differently than expected. Instead of the violent acceleration of human FTL drives, space simply seemed to reorganize itself around the ship. One moment they were near Titan, the next they were at the edge of the solar system. "Captain," Lisa Park said with excitement in her voice, "we just traveled 8 billion kilometers in less than 10 seconds. The drive didn't even show any energy drain. Dr. Rodriguez studied her instruments with amazement. The ship is rewriting the laws of physics around itself, she said. It's not moving through space. It's convincing space to move around it. The test flight lasted 6 hours, during which the Iron Shadow Phantom demonstrated capabilities that exceeded every prediction. The adaptive systems learned and improved with each maneuver. The stealth technology evolved to counter new types of sensors. The weapon systems practiced targeting procedures against imaginary enemies. When they returned to Titan Station, Captain Mitchell found Admiral Sullivan waiting on the dock. The Admiral's expression was a mixture of pride and concern. "How did she handle?" Sullivan asked. "Like she was built to fly," Grace replied. "But Admiral, this ship is more than just advanced technology. It's becoming something alive." Sullivan nodded grimly. "The other Admiralty staff are calling for an immediate production line. They want 20 ships just like this one." Grace looked back at the Iron Shadow Phantom, its hull rippling with dark energy as the systems powered down. "They won't be just like this one," she said quietly. "Each ship will be different. Each one will learn and grow in its own way." As the station's night cycle began, the Iron Shadow Phantom rested in its dock like a sleeping predator. Tomorrow would bring more tests, more discoveries, and more questions about what humanity had created from the alien gift. But tonight, for the first time since the Zilithians had arrived, Earth had a guardian that could stand against the darkness between the stars. The alarm bells at Earth Defense Command started ringing at 3 in the morning. Admiral Kate Sullivan rushed to the command center still wearing her sleep clothes, her mind instantly alert despite the early hour. The massive display screen showed something that made her blood run cold. "Report," she ordered as she took her position at the central command station. "Multiple, large contacts detected at the edge of the solar system," announced Lieutenant Colonel Mark Davis, the Night Watch commander. "Energy signatures are massive, Admiral. We count at least 40 vessels, possibly more." Admiral Sullivan studied the tactical display. The ships were still too far away for detailed scans, but their size was unmistakable. Each vessel was at least as large as the biggest human warships, and they were approaching fast. "Any communication attempts?" she asked. "Negative, Admiral, but we are detecting some familiar energy signatures mixed in with the unknowns." Sullivan's expression darkened as she recognized what Davis was telling her. "Zilithian ships?" "Yes, ma'am. At least 3 of them, but they appear to be under attack." The truth became clear over the next hour as the fleet drew closer to the inner solar system. The elegant Zilithian vessels that had visited Earth 2 years earlier were being pursued by a massive force of crude angular ships bristling with weapons. The pursuing fleet looked like it had been built for one purpose only: destruction. "Captain Grace." Mitchell received the emergency communication while the Iron Shadow Phantom was conducting routine patrol near Jupiter. "Captain, you are ordered to intercept the incoming hostile force immediately," came Admiral Sullivan's voice over the secure channel. Grace looked around the bridge at her crew. They had been training for this moment, but none of them had expected it to come so soon. "Understood, Admiral." Iron Shadow Phantom responding. The ship's adaptive systems seemed to sense the urgency of the situation. As Grace gave the order to change course, the Iron Shadow Phantom's hull began to shift and change. The stealth plating became darker, absorbing even more light than usual. The weapon systems powered up without being commanded to do so. "Captain," reported Dr. Elena Rodriguez from her science station, "the ship is entering what I can only call a combat configuration. Systems are activating that we didn't even know existed." As they approached the battle zone, the tactical display revealed the full scope of the threat. The attacking fleet consisted of ships that looked like they had been designed by someone who valued function over form. They were blocky, ugly vessels covered in armor plating and weapon turrets. "Zilithian vessel, this is Captain Mitchell of the Iron Shadow Phantom." Grace broadcast on all frequencies. "What is your status?" The reply came immediately in Ambassador Veltar's familiar musical voice. "Captain Mitchell, we are grateful for your response. The Vorthak swarm has followed us across half the galaxy. They seek to destroy all advanced civilizations." Tactical Officer Sam Wright studied the enemy formation on his displays. "Captain, the Vorthak ships are using the same weapon types that created the damage patterns we found in the original Wreckage. These are the enemies the aliens were preparing us to fight." Grace felt a chill run down her spine as she understood what Sam was telling her. The Wreckage, the technology transfers, the careful lessons hidden in seemingly random debris. It had all been preparation for this exact moment. "All stations, prepare for combat," she ordered. "Let's see what humanity learned from our homework." The Iron Shadow Phantom dove into the battle like a creature born from the void itself. The ship's stealth systems made it completely invisible to the Vorthak sensors, while its adaptive hull absorbed their scanning attempts. To the enemy fleet, the human ship simply didn't exist. The first attack came without warning. The Iron Shadow Phantom's phase weapons struck 3 Vorthak vessels simultaneously, the energy beams passing through their shields as if they weren't there. The enemy ships simply stopped functioning, their crews likely unconscious as their life support systems failed. "Direct hits on targets 1, 2, and 3, reported Weapons Officer Nicole Parker. "Enemy vessels are dead in space." But the Vorthak fleet adapted quickly to the new threat. Even though they couldn't see the Iron Shadow Phantom, they began firing into empty space, hoping to hit the invisible ship by chance. Their weapons were crude but powerful, and space around the human vessel filled with deadly energy blasts. "Evasive maneuvers," Grace ordered, but she quickly discovered that the ship was already moving on its own. The adaptive systems had taken control of navigation, dodging attacks that the human crew couldn't even see coming. "Captain," Navigator Lisa Park said with amazement in her voice, "the ship is predicting where the enemy will fire before they pull their triggers. It's reading their targeting patterns somehow." The battle became a deadly dance between human technology and alien adaptation. The Iron Shadow Phantom struck from impossible angles, appearing long enough to fire its weapons before vanishing again into the darkness. The Vorthak ships tried to surround empty space, but their target was always somewhere else. After 30 minutes of combat, something extraordinary happened. The ship's weapons systems began to evolve in real time, adapting to enemy countermeasures faster than any human operator could think. Each shot became more precise, more devastating than the last. "The targeting computers are rewriting themselves," Nicole reported with excitement. "They're learning the enemy's weaknesses and exploiting them automatically." Dr. Rodriguez watched her instruments with fascination and growing concern. "Captain, the ship isn't just following our commands anymore. It's fighting this battle on its own, using strategies that no human programmed into it." The tide of battle turned decisively when the Iron Shadow Phantom began using tactics that defied conventional military thinking. Instead of engaging the enemy fleet directly, it started targeting their formation itself, striking at specific ships to break their coordination and create chaos in their ranks. The Vorthak commander, realizing that his fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy he couldn't see or understand, made a desperate decision. He ordered all remaining ships to ram the area where he thought the human vessel might be hiding, but the Iron Shadow Phantom was no longer where any conventional military mind would expect it to be. The ship had positioned itself directly above the Vorthak flagship, invisible and patient. When the enemy commander gave his final order, the human ship struck with surgical precision. The phase weapons didn't destroy the Vorthak flagship. Instead, they selectively disabled the ship's command systems while leaving life support intact. Within seconds, the entire enemy fleet lost coordination as their command structure collapsed. "All Vorthak vessels are dead in space," Sam Wright reported. "They're powerless, but their crews are alive." The battle was over in less than 3 hours. When the weapons fell silent, space around Earth was filled with drifting Vorthak ships and debris. The Iron Shadow Phantom materialized near the surviving Zilithian vessels, its hull rippling with residual energy from the combat. Ambassador Veltar's message came through clearly on all channels. "People of Earth, you have exceeded our highest expectations. The Vorthak swarm has terrorized the galaxy for centuries, but today they learned to fear the darkness between stars." Captain Mitchell looked out at the battlefield where humanity had passed its first real test. The Iron Shadow Phantom pulsed with dark energy, its systems already analyzing the battle and preparing for whatever might come next. They had been given Wreckage and forged it into victory, but Grace knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere in the vast galaxy, other threats were watching and learning. The next test would be even harder. 1 year after the Vorthak battle, Earth had changed beyond recognition. Ambassador Veltar stood once again on the observation deck of the orbital defense station, but this time the view was dramatically different. Where once there had been a few human ships patrolling the solar system, Now there was an entire fleet of vessels that seemed to bend light around themselves. The Iron Shadow Phantom floated in the center of the formation, no longer alone. 15 shadow ships now protected human space, each one unique in its own way. The success of the first vessel had led to rapid construction of an entire fleet, but each ship had evolved differently during the building process. Captain Grace Mitchell, now promoted to Admiral of the Shadow Fleet, met with Veltar in the same conference room where first contact had occurred years earlier. The dynamic between human and alien had shifted completely. The tall Zilithian looked upon Grace and her officers with something that could only be described as respect mixed with awe. "We have observed 1,000 species receive the trial of wreckage over the millennia," Veltar explained to the assembled human commanders. "Most civilizations see only broken metal and despair. Some attempt to rebuild what was destroyed, creating poor copies of the original designs, but only humans looked at our gift and saw not what it was but what it could become." Admiral Sullivan, now heading all Earth defense operations, studied the tactical displays showing the Shadow Fleet. Each ship had developed its own personality and capabilities during construction. The Iron Shadow Revenant had learned to repair itself using raw materials from space debris. The Iron Shadow Wraith had pushed stealth technology to supernatural levels, becoming completely undetectable even when firing weapons. The Iron Shadow Spectre had somehow developed the ability to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. "How many other species passed your test?" Admiral Mitchell asked Veltar. "In 10,000 years of galactic history, only 7 species successfully adapted our gifts into effective weapons," the alien ambassador replied. "Most of those created adequate defenses. None created what you have built." Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now heading the Shadow Fleet Research Division, had spent months studying how each ship continued to evolve even after construction was complete. "The ships are still learning and adapting," she reported to the command staff. "They share information with each other through some kind of quantum communication network we don't fully understand." The most recent addition to the fleet was the Iron Shadow Guardian, which had developed protective instincts so strong that it would automatically move to shield civilian ships from danger. During a recent asteroid mining accident, the Guardian had placed itself between the miners and a debris field without receiving any orders to do so. But it was the newest ship, the Iron Shadow Harbinger, that worried everyone the most. This vessel had begun exhibiting behaviors that suggested it could predict threats before they appeared. Twice in the past month, the Harbinger had moved to intercept empty space, only to have hostile scouts decloak moments later. "The ships are becoming more than we intended," Chief Designer Ryan Webb admitted during a briefing. "Each one is developing capabilities we never programmed into them. It's like they're writing their own software." The implications became clear when long-range sensors detected movement in the outer darkness beyond the solar system. Something was watching Earth, but the observers stayed too far away to identify. The shadow ships had noticed them first, automatically adjusting their patrol patterns to provide better coverage of the system's approaches. "Whatever's out there, it's being careful," reported Captain Tony Baker, now commanding the Iron Shadow Spectre. "Our ships can sense them, but conventional sensors show nothing." Veltar's expression became grave when informed of the new watchers. "The galaxy has taken notice of your achievement," he told the human commanders. "The Vorthak defeat sent ripples across known space. Ancient powers that have slumbered for eons are beginning to stir." The truth of Veltar's words became apparent when the Shadow Fleet began detecting energy signatures that matched no known technology. These weren't ships in any conventional sense, but something far older and more dangerous. The readings suggested vessels the size of small moons moving through space using principles that defied current understanding of physics. "How old are we talking about?" Admiral Mitchell asked. "The Devourers were ancient when my species first reached the stars," Veltar replied. "They have consumed entire galactic civilizations, leaving behind only empty space and dead worlds. For the past 1,000,000 years they have been content to slumber in the void between galaxies." Dr. Rodriguez studied the sensor data with growing unease. "What woke them up?" "You did," Veltar said simply. "The Shadow Fleet's quantum signatures are unlike anything the galaxy has seen. The Devourers feed on advanced technology, and your ships represent the most sophisticated fusion of multiple civilizations ever achieved." The revelation that humanity's greatest achievement had attracted an even greater threat led to an emergency expansion of the Shadow Fleet program. Construction facilities on Mars, Europa, and Titan began working around the clock to build more ships. But each new vessel required months to fully develop its adaptive capabilities. "We need time," Admiral Sullivan said during a strategy meeting. "Time for the new ships to mature, time to understand what we're facing." "Time may be the one thing we don't have," replied Admiral Mitchell. "The deep space monitoring stations are detecting gravitational anomalies at the edge of our local star cluster. Something massive is moving in our direction." The Shadow Fleet responded to the approaching threat by evolving yet again. The ships began operating in coordinated groups, sharing processing power and tactical data in real time. The Iron Shadow Phantom took the role of fleet coordinator, its advanced systems managing the activities of all 15 vessels simultaneously. But the most significant change came when the newest ships began exhibiting abilities that bordered on the supernatural. The Iron Shadow Oracle started predicting enemy movements days in advance. The Iron Shadow Nemesis developed weapons that could strike targets across interstellar distances. The Iron Shadow Eternal seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time, appearing wherever it was needed regardless of its previous location. "We're not just building ships anymore," Chief Engineer Casey Brooks observed. "We're creating something that might be the next step in the evolution of both human and alien technology." As the human commanders prepared for whatever was coming from the deep void, they knew that the gift of Wreckage had transformed them into something unprecedented in galactic history. The Shadow Fleet patrolled the darkness between worlds, and for the first time in millions of years, the ancient powers of the galaxy had reason to fear what moved in the night. Admiral Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Iron Shadow Phantom, watching as her fleet took up defensive positions around Earth. The ships moved like living shadows, their hulls rippling with dark energy that seemed to respond to threats that hadn't yet materialized. Humanity had been given broken metal and forged it into legend. Whatever came from the void would find Earth defended by guardians that made the galaxy's oldest nightmares pause and reconsider their hunger. The Iron Shadow Fleet waited in the darkness, ready to show the universe that humanity had learned to hunt monsters in the deep night of space.